Welcome along to the unit analysis series, a brand new series where we look at the units, let them speak for themselves, investigate the history of the units, the armies, and then in the second part of the video I will look at how they do on the battlefield. So, camels, where do we first learn about camels? One of the first significant encounters and battles where camels were used was Farnborough, where King Cyrus was fighting the Lydians. The numbers are exaggerated, but probably his army was just under 100,000 men, and the Lydians were probably around double that. And apparently he had around 300 camels. But what was very interesting was that they were actually baggage camels. He converted baggage camels to camels that he can use to fight on the battlefield. So he gave them some protection, some armor, put some archers on them, kept some archers and supporting infantry close by. And what happened was, when he put them on the flanks, the enemy cavalry came up, the lancers, and they were spooked by the camels, and then the cavalry dispersed, scattered, and then all the archers moved forward and shot them to bits, basically. And this was a great advantage for the Persians, because one of the strengths of the Lydian army were their lancers, some of the best cavalry at the time. And if you could just hold back the enemy where they're strong, then often you find this happens in games actually, where you're holding on one side and pushing on the other. And in this battle, that's what the Persians did. They managed to push through with their infantry in the center to win the day. So the camels were very, very effective. Why are camels used? Well, compared to cavalry and horses, they have more stamina. They're apparently less nervous than horses, and they can go for long periods without water, which is especially important, of course, in the Middle East and in hot countries. The other thing about it is that archers are actually in quite an elevated position. Now, this came up in discussion on the forum about camels. Someone mentioned that they looked a bit odd because they looked so sort of out of proportion to the rest of the units that you see. But this is actually realistic, because your average horse is about 1.4 to 1.8 meters tall, whereas camels are significantly larger. They're about 1.8 to 2 meters tall, so quite a bit taller than your average horse. So that just means that archers are higher up, got elevation, and also I think camels are just a bit more stable. They provide more stability, especially for firing from compared to horses. So that's where they can be especially useful. Camels were also used when the Persians invaded Greece in 480 BC. And again, they proved themselves to do very well against enemy cavalry. So that's a little bit of the history. Let's have a look at how they do in the game. So how do they do on the battlefield? Well, I checked the army lists. For the Persians, there are 6 army lists, and 4 of them have access to camels, but only one of them, Farnborough, have access to the Improvised Camelry. This unit has quite an advantage over your standard camels because it is armoured, and the Arab Camelry is unarmoured. So that's a 50 difference in POA terms. They do very well against cavalry, They might be down on impact against a lot of cav, but it's not by much. They don't usually disrupt, and then they have the advantage in melee. So they're 30 down against noble cav and veteran armored cav on impact, but then they're 45 up against noble cav in melee and 20 up against veteran armored cav in melee, which is really good. Armored cav, they're 20 up on impact and 70 up in melee, and even against the better units like armored superior lancers such as Lydian lancers, if they survive impact, they're 80 down on impact. They go to 20 up in melee, which is really good. Really good. Heavy chariots, 130 down on impact, but then again 20 up in melee. So a really good unit. And the other thing to say about them is that they have a bow. So in my tests, they were causing about 20 casualties with one volley of arrows, and 20 casualties is quite significant because a lot of units are only around 240. So, 20 casualties before you've even got into the melee rounds is quite an advantage. So they're also going to have a slight combat strength modifier advantage as well. So really good units. Your standard camels are basically 50 down because they don't have armor, but on impact it's the same because we don't count armor on impact. And in my tests, against like noble cavalry, the standard camels are only 5 down, which is nothing really, and 30 down against a veteran armored cav, which again is not much at all. So really good unit, a really good unit. One little quirk as well, what I found when I put them up against heavy chariots, that you don't get armor advantage against heavy chariots. So these guys perform the same as the standard camels against heavy chariots, which is interesting. You don't get any armor advantage. Also, I put them up against elephants, and I discovered that they get disordered by elephants. So elephants, I knew that obviously that elephants disorder cavalry, but they also disorder camels as well. So a really good unit, and we can take 4. So I would take 4. This is the finder list. Got tons of arrows and bowmen, and even a couple of mass bowmen there. So actually, when I come to think of it, everything on here is bowmen. Our camels have got bow, immortals, sparrow bar foot, the Iranian armored cav with bow, massed eastern archers. So that is quite good, and it's going to be tough for your opponents to take all this missile fire. My rating, I'm going to give them the improvised camelry, I guess I'm going to give them about a 9, maybe even a 9.5. Price is good, 56. They've got bow, obviously they've got the disordering factor. Just a great unit, really, all-round great unit. And the standard camels, I'm going to give them about an 8. They're not as good value as these guys, but still they can do a job. They've got the bow, they've got the disordering factor. So really good units.